Jen and Kate Show, and for today's quick thought, I've titled it "Oh Wanderer," and we're going to be talking about what happens when we wander from God and we wander from that relationship with Christ and it weakens. So the first thing that I want to say is we wander. It's in our nature. It's our human nature to wander from God. We have a sin nature. It's gonna happen. One of our jobs as Christians is to make sure that it doesn't happen. But Isaiah 53 verse 4 says, "Yet he himself bore our sickness and carried our pains, and we in turn regarded him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted." And then skip to verse 6. "We all went astray like sheep. We all have turned to our own way, and the Lord has punished him for the iniquity of us all." We all go astray like sheep. That's what Isaiah says here. This is a prophecy of Jesus. This was spoken way before Jesus came. This is a prophecy, and specifically it says, even back then, we know that the Israelites turned from God constantly. We do it too. It's a perfect example of our lives. So first thing that we should consider is, before we stray, or when you're in the process and you feel yourself getting distant from God, we should point out first that it's never God moving away from you. It's always you moving away from God. That should be the first thing to say first. So consider this before you stray, or while you're straying away and you realize it and you don't know what to do. You think that, I'll just pray and read my Bible and everything will be okay. Consider this: the consequences. Sin has consequences. When we sin, whether the consequences are right now or later, or they're huge or they're small, there's always a consequence. You might think that because you're all alone when you sin that it has no consequences. It will either be brought into the light and then you'll have consequences, or you will receive consequences on Judgment Day. Think about that for a second. And then we also have consequences when we stray from God, because it could derail us from God's will. Everybody as a Christian wants God's will for their life. So whenever you don't do what he said, or you're not listening when he's trying to explain to you something that you should be doing, you could derail yourself, and now you're not on the correct path when it comes to going to college or getting your first job, moving to a new city. If you're not listening to God, focused on what he wants, striving for a relationship with Christ, you're not going to hear him and you're going to stray away. So the second thing is, consider this: Jesus' burden on the cross. When we sin, we put further iniquity on Christ on the cross. Iniquity as in that pain, that spiritual pain that he experienced on the cross. When we sin now, it puts more of a burden on Christ. He died for our past, present, and future sins. So every time we sin, it's more and more and more, and it piles up. This should break our heart. After reading just in this passage in Isaiah of what Jesus did for us, this should break your heart. This should make you want to not sin and not stray from God, to follow him consistently and be persistent. The second that we stop leaning on God is when we start to stray. It's when we start to wander. When you're not dependent on God for strength or for guidance anymore, you start thinking that your own way is better. And let me read. We all have turned to our own way. That was in verse 6. We all have turned to our own way. When you start turning to your own way, that's when you leave God behind. He never leaves you. It's always us. So how do we combat that is the question. Be persistent. Replace bad habits with good habits. Prayer, constantly praying. Philippians 4:6, pray constantly without ceasing. That's so important in a walk with Christ. That's how we communicate with God. Studying your Bible. Really working hard to understand what your Bible is telling you. Not just reading it, understanding it. So I hope that you got something out of this. Maybe you've been wondering, or someone you know has, and you can finally say, I think I know what I need to do, and I know the consequences of wandering. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.